Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto. Today we're going to talk about yellow lights. Yellow lights. I've mentioned before a couple different topics involving driving and traffic laws and how yellow lights affect what you do. And the funny thing is that from time to time people will chime in on what they think a yellow light means. And quite often people are wrong. So I thought this is a good idea to talk today about what a yellow light means and what the laws are surrounding this. Now, you have to remember, I'm talking about Michigan law. That's where I'm licensed to practice law. So, if you are in a different state, a non-Michigan state, 49 of which qualify, it's very easy to check what the law is in your state. Most states, I believe, now have their laws online, and so you can go to Google and type in some phrases, which we'll talk about in a second, and you type those phrases in, and hopefully you can find the laws. So for instance, in Michigan, I typed in Michigan traffic law yellow light. And I got a bunch of hits, as you might imagine. But one or two of the hits very, very high up were the website that the state legislature runs, where they actually have all of the Michigan compiled laws online. So I mentioned before, the blue books behind me are the Michigan compiled laws. And I could pull the book out and look up the statute, but that would upset the 2 or 3 viewers who hate to see the books uneven. So I printed out the statutes offline. So for instance, in Michigan, traffic control signals, red light, green light, yellow light, the lights are governed by MCL 257.612, 257.612, okay? And, I'm not going to read the whole statute to you because we're only talking about yellow lights today. But one of my favorite parts of the entire statute is the first sentence where it says, when traffic is controlled by traffic control signals, not fewer than one signal shall be located over the traveled portion of the roadway. So if you think about that, they're saying, look, if it's controlled by a traffic control device, there will actually be a traffic control device there to control the traffic, because not fewer than one signal will be located. So in other words, if there's no signal located, they can't claim there's one. And if they want there to be one, they've got to put one there. There's no such thing as an imaginary traffic control device, I guess, is the best way to put it. So, for instance, it says if the signal exhibits a green indication, green light, vehicular traffic facing the signal may proceed straight through or turn right or left unless a sign at that place prohibits either turn. Vehicular traffic, including vehicles turning right or left, shall yield the right-of-way to other vehicles and to pedestrians and bicyclists lawfully within the intersection, or an adjacent crosswalk at the time the signal is exhibited. So, the green light is licensed to proceed, but it's not licensed to run people over, simply put. Now, here's where we get to the fun part. If the signal exhibits a steady yellow indication, and this is where people get confused, because I've talked before about taking charge of an intersection, and I've had people say, Steve, if you enter the intersection on a green and then the light turns red for you to proceed, by definition, you've violated the red light rule. And I've had people even say that even if the light turns yellow, you've violated the yellow light rule. And those aren't the case in either situation, because the law talks about when you can enter the intersection. So if the signal exhibits a steady yellow indication, vehicular traffic facing the signal, or think approaching the signal, shall stop before entering the nearest crosswalk at the intersection or at a limit line when marked. But if the stop cannot be made in safety, a vehicle may be driven cautiously through the intersection. So, I've joked with people and they say, Steve, what does the yellow light mean? And I used to joke, say, you floor it. Obviously, that's not me giving you an example of the law. That's me joking, because that's what a lot of people think. Okay, but the point is that a yellow light indicates, generally speaking, that you should stop. Okay, but if the stop cannot be made in safety, a vehicle may be driven cautiously through the intersection. Cautiously being the key word. So what that's designed to do is a typical situation. You're approaching a light and the light is indicating green, which means you can proceed. There's a window of time, a window of space as you approach the intersection, where if the light changes yellow, you don't have time to stop safely, okay? So you're driving along, following the speed limit, and you get, almost the intersection, and the light goes yellow. If you stomp on the brakes, it's dangerous. You might not stop in time, and you might cause the person behind you to rear-end you. Okay, so the point is that you should try to stop if you can, but if the stop cannot be made in safety, a vehicle may be driven cautiously through the intersection. And that's actually the section I cut and pasted this morning to somebody who commented on one of my videos and said, Steve, you're not allowed to enter the intersection on yellow. You're just not. Well, in Michigan, you are. And I suspect in your state, you are as well. Otherwise, the cops could just sit there and write tickets for every single person who approached the light and didn't have time to stop. And that's, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But again, I have not examined all the laws in all 50 states. So maybe some law out there in some state is wacky and says that. I don't know. But I've never seen it. And then you'll notice that if the signal exhibits a steady red indication, vehicular traffic facing the steady red shall stop before entering the crosswalk. So that's why I said that when you take charge of the intersection, you're not violating the red light law because you're past the crosswalk if you've entered the intersection. So, and then down below, a person who violates the subsections that Mr. Lehto just described to you is responsible for a civil infraction. So there is a law being broken. It's not a crime, it's a civil infraction, but it is going to involve fines and costs and even possibly points on your license, depending on what state you're in. In Michigan, it will certainly get you some points. So again, the yellow light means that you should stop before entering the crosswalk or the demarcation line. But if the stop cannot be made in safety, a vehicle may be driven cautiously through the intersection. Now, I will tell you that there's also some confusion on arrows and blinking lights. And while looking this up, I ran across several websites that pointed out that blinking yellow lights cause a lot of problems for drivers, especially late at night and if they're drunk. And in one attorney's website, he said that in his experience, the second most ticketed drunk drivers out there, what gets them ticketed and pulled over in the first place is the fact that they stopped at a blinking yellow. And it's almost as if this is a trap for drunk drivers because flashing red or yellow signals, and then what they mean, flashing red, when a red lens is illuminated by rapid intermittent flashes, drivers of vehicles shall stop before entering the nearest crosswalk or the intersection. And the right to proceed shall be subject to the rules applicable after making a stop at a stop sign. So a blinking red is basically a stop sign for all practical legal purposes. But the flashing yellow, what does a flashing yellow mean? Flashing yellow is a caution signal according to the Michigan compiled laws. And when a yellow lens is illuminated with a rapid intermittent flashes, drivers of vehicles may proceed through the intersection or pass the signal only with caution. Only with caution. But the point is that if you're approaching an intersection at night, there's nobody around, and the light is blinking yellow, you can just drive through it because that's doing it with caution. As long as you're not speeding, you just drive. And from what I understand, a lot of people who have been drinking and know they might be over the limits for whatever the different stages of drunk driving are, they don't want to do anything that could get them pulled over, so they think, I've got to be very, very cautious. I need to not break any laws, and I got to do whatever I can to stay, below the radar. Well, the problem is if you're on the road at 2 o'clock in the morning and the roads are empty, it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to be on the radar. But what happens is, and I mean that figuratively speaking, what happens though is a police officer sees you driving and notices you're driving like well below the speed limit, or you may be weaving or something. And those kinds of things can give a police officer a reason to pull you over, possibly, depending on how much weaving you're doing and so on. But when you approach the blinking yellow light and there's nobody around you, you can just drive right through it. And apparently if you stop at a blinking yellow light, which you would be required to do if you had to take caution. In other words, let's suppose there's other cars crossing in the intersection, or there's something in the intersection, then if you were forced to stop, yeah, you stop, but you don't have to stop. So you can proceed past the signal, but with caution. And so apparently this traffic citation is a common one that police use. So they know there's a problem area with a lot of bars or something like that, or they just want to park someplace and just watch traffic, they'll sometimes park themselves near a blinking yellow light, and hilarity ensues because people who are drunk enough to think they're being cautious. We've all met those people who don't know they're drunk. And they approach the blinking yellow light. There's nobody else in the road, and they come to a complete stop. A police officer can then look at that and go, oh, they are actually not behaving appropriately because it says you can proceed through the intersection with caution. And you had no reason to stop. Why did you do that? So apparently stopping at the flashing yellow is considered to be a ticketable offense, which can also get you then pulled over. And at the bottom it does say a person who violates a section is responsible for a civil infraction. And of course, anytime you see the phrase things like with caution or reasonable or whatever, it's open to interpretation. And of course, you're not so worried about the ticket you get for disobeying the flashing yellow. You're more concerned about the ticket you get when the police officer says, do you know why I pulled you over after you stopped at that blinking yellow light? And by the way, your breath reeks of alcohol and your eyes are bloodshot, and I notice there's a couple empty, Jack Daniels bottles on the front seat of your car. And there appears to be vomit all over the front of your pants. What's going on, And I'm cracking jokes. I'm not talking about whether or not you should answer those questions, okay? So getting back to the original point, though, I was making is the steady yellow indicator, a yellow light. It does mean you should stop if you can, but if the stop cannot be made in safety, a vehicle may be driven cautiously through the intersection. So that's the state of the law in Michigan, okay? And what it is in your state, look it up. It's not that hard to do. So try to find a government website that contains the laws of your state, like Michigan compiled laws, or the California laws, or Minnesota laws. Try to find them on a government-run website because they'll actually often have the statutes in full. You can read them in full. But if you find even an attorney in your state who does traffic stuff, a lot of times they'll give explanations of the law and they'll give the citation for the law, and you can run the citation directly if that didn't do it for you in the first place. So look the law up where you are, but know it. But no, a yellow light does not mean you stomp on the brakes to avoid going through the intersection. Questions or comments, as always, shoot them my way. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.